it can't be understated enough. It's a key component to, I think, any success of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in any sector. If you understand the components of emotional intelligence, you yourself will elevate, you'll heighten your capability in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
Charlotte Smith, absolutely delighted to have you on the Purpose-Led Leadership podcast. Welcome to the show. We've been buddies on LinkedIn. We met at a couple of award ceremonies. I've always wanted to get you on the show, so welcome.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. You are popping my podcast cherry.
Brilliant. Well, that's a claim to fame I didn't think I'd have.
Yeah, it is. It is. 2024 is about saying yes to stuff. So I'm really excited about it. Thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. On your LinkedIn, you've got reference to your Instagram, and your Instagram is all things recruitment, which I absolutely love.
It is indeed.
What's the constant context behind that? Because I think your family's in recruitment. You love recruitment, don't you, basically?
It's all I've got. I'm a one-trick pony, and I'm completely comfortable with that. So I grew up in a household that was my dad runs a haulage drivers agency. Growing up, I used to go into the office with him all the time. And obviously it's a lot more rugged than the tech recruitment that I'm in now. Yeah. I'm one of 4 siblings. We're all in recruitment. I am, for my sins, married to a recruiter. And as I said, since I was 19 years old, all I have done is recruitment. Wow. So there is no other title for me. I am all things recruitment. I
love the title of that. So I'm sure you've got plenty of war stories, and between us, we could probably write a few novels in our journey in recruitment. So we're going to delve quite a lot into that. But why do you love recruitment so much? What is it about recruitment that you enjoy?
I think if I think about my whole journey, it's the simplicity of this trade, right? It requires mental discipline and resilience, absolutely. And that's been a journey over the near to 2 decades that I've been in this. And the position that I'm in now, I'm trying to teach people how to overcome that. But actually, this industry has given me so much. Some of my best friends, some of the most epic experiences in my life, it's not all about financials, but some lovely financial reward. And, when you look at the last 2 years with like the cost of living crisis and the position that some households are in, actually this career in recruitment has, of course, we're all a little bit stressed in times at the moment, but certainly not as stressed as some people that are hardworking in other professions. I think recruitment's given me that chance to take a breath in life and just experience nice things. Yeah,
it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think that whilst it's a very hard gig, and I always say it's one of the hardest sales jobs in the world, let's not pretend it doesn't give us the rewards as well, right? So we are in a fortunate position, I think.
And it isn't just financial, it's friendships, it's relationships. I met my husband in this industry, and as a result have a beautiful son because of that. I have so much to thank because of recruitment, and I'm completely okay with admitting I'm a recruiter. I love this profession, and I'm happy to continue on with this until I retire.
And that's what I love about you and people like Dom Joyce and other people, right, that I've come to become good friends with. There's a big stigma, I think, attached to recruiters, and I think some of it is justified to an extent, but I love how you wave the recruitment flag and you're proud about it. I think we should be, right?
Yeah, we find people jobs, Chris. We don't do a terrible thing. There are sales industries out there that sell you dodgy insurance, crap used cars, pointless triple glazing. We don't do a bad thing. Of course, back in the day, there were some sneaky tactics to be able to produce that result. But you can't force a client to hire a candidate they don't want.
Totally.
And you can't really force a candidate to take a job that they don't want. We just have to be purposeful facilitators in that process. And actually, I think the way that the industry has evolved, more truthful, authentic, being genuine subject matter experts, has put a lot of honesty back into this trade. And the people that do it really well don't do it with sneaky cutthroat tactics. They're genuinely very good at what they do, and I'm really proud of that.
I love that. But let's talk about those cheeky cutthroat tactics as well. So, I mean, it does happen. As you say, in other industries, I actually think it's worse, but let's not compare. But, you know, why does it have a bad name then? What would you like to see eradicated specifically from the sector if possible?
Well, there's a pedigree, isn't there, which you've come from, I've come from. We think about those big names back in the day, right? So I was cut from the S3
Me
cloth,
too,
right?
yeah, as you know, yeah.
And that was a hyper growth model with managers that were promoted into that role because they billed really well. They themselves were incredibly young.
Yeah,
they'd inherited and worked hard to have that fortune, and then they were put in a position where they had to manage the next wave of 19, 20-year-old junior recruitment consultants to hit targets that showcase their abilities to not only now be big billers but big managers. And I think what that did back then was force the hand of bad habits. It forced us to be overworked and overstretched. It was lax with communication skills. Emotional intelligence didn't come into any of it back then. And it was do whatever it takes to get the information to pull a job, to fill a job. And there was that perception of that's how you needed to be, not only to deliver, but also back then to fit in. And I think that's been an evolution over the last 10 years, I would say, of trying to turn that around to becoming a more complex individual when you're managing and growing teams. As we say it all the time, big billers always don't make the best of managers, but actually recruitment businesses have got a hell of a lot better of finding different tracks for people to run on. And they are recruiting, you know, and I'm comfortable saying this because I was one of the ones that were hired 20 years ago. I don't have a degree. I didn't have anything other than a little bit of sales experience selling used Vauxhalls, right? I think we hire a more intelligent individual now at the grassroots phase as well, and they're more socially aware, and that's better for the industry as a whole.
I totally agree. I think what worked then doesn't necessarily work now. I think that model did kind of work to a degree back then because people didn't know any different. It was like run through a brick wall for me. You know, if you made 100 calls, make 101 calls. And it was all about the numbers and the metrics. And obviously you still need to have that. But the point you made about the emotional intelligence piece, I think that's the difference between a good consultant and a great consultant. Because anyone can churn out the numbers. You can get into a process. You can map it really well. But I think a good recruitment or salesperson isn't just a good salesperson. They're a good person at actually influencing people. A good people person. So you've got to have that emotional. You got to have that. You got to smell how to respond. Even on the phone call, I could within the half of the first word the person say, I would adapt my style to that person. It's that kind of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and it can't be understated enough. It's a key component to, I think, any success of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in any sector. If you understand the components of emotional intelligence, you yourself will elevate, you'll heighten your capability in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Way back then, that was not a thing. That was not a thing, and that certainly wasn't being taught. It's now something that we interview around. You know, it's not likability and culture fit. It's authenticity, it's passion, it's gravitas, it's self-awareness, self-management. All of these things have become incredibly important to be a market-leading recruiter.
I think as well the kind of the growth of things like personal brand as well. I think that, you know, it didn't exist when we were doing it, really, did it? But I think that you have to be a person, you have to be a personality out there as well. And I think having a personal brand, being a bit vulnerable, being a bit open, being real. I've seen recruiters, one-person band recruiters, open up gigantic multi-billion-dollar accounts because they're just dealing with the person to a person, as opposed to when I was doing it at S3, we sold on the what the business can do, the capability, the size of the business, the size of the database, all that kind of stuff. I think that's important, but it's not as important.
Well, people see past that now, Chris. Every recruitment business is going to have a CRM. They're going to have a sensible L&D structure. They'll have incentives. They'll have commission schemes. When you go and interview with someone and people put you on the spot and ask you those questions, you know, why your brand over another brand?
Yeah, of course.
Well, really, it's about the chemistry that you have with that person and how you vibe with those individuals. You know, when I've looked at businesses that I've wanted to join, the recruitment business is the recruitment business. It's the collective of individuals and the emotional intelligence and the charisma and the values and the motivation of that leadership team that I would be joining. That's thing one. And actually, the generation that are joining the recruitment industry now, you know, not wanting to get into your millennials and your Gen Zers now, but that is so much more important for them, is the energy
totally agree
that they get from the individuals that are interviewing them as they decide to join this as an industry. Or, of course, when you're a senior consultant, whether you believe those individuals can get you to the next heights, not the company's CRM or marketing budget or
even
L&D
commission
team.
scheme, actually.
Well,
Because I think a lot of leadership teams or owners think, oh, we've got a great commission scheme, or, you know, we do this, we do that. But actually, it's important to somebody. Of course it is. I'm not going to say it's not. But what you just touched on there, I think a lot of businesses really underestimate the power of getting that culture piece right. I mean, how would you advise a business to build that culture you just talked about?
I think it's top down, bottom up, personally, and that builds into a strategy. You know, as you know, Chris, my responsibility has gone from being a biller for, you know, I've been in recruitment since 2005, right? So for the last 11 years, I've been in L&D, operational, talent, performance orientated roles. And that's been such a learning curve. And I think the conclusion that I'm at now is you can't just sit in a room with your leadership team and talk about how to cascade the right messages down if you are not prepared as a performance professional to embed that and grow that from the bottom up. And then if you work really consciously at the top end and the bottom end, everybody else in the middle comes along for the ride as well. It promotes best practice and behaviors across all within the business. You have to have your key stakeholder relationships within that, but that isn't just your directors or your trainees. I call them your people of influence. So those that are bedded into any business, that have usually achieved good things within a business, they have good billings, they have a good reputation. Those people can carry your message by being positive about what it is that you're trying to embed in, and you have to bring them in on your journey as well. And I think every single person in the business will have a different strength and weakness. As you touched on before, just because someone's a good biller doesn't make them a good manager. That's an obvious one, but people fall into that trap. But I think when I go into businesses, I think you do the same. I always try and do like a skills analysis of where each person is. And that's one element, but getting to understand what makes that person tick and understanding what they kind of do outside of work as well. And, you know, so when I built my business up to 100 people, I was still very much having lots of one-to-one meetings with the people on the ground. Because I think it's really important that the leadership team is in tune with that, irrespective of how big the business gets. And I think sometimes businesses can get a bit kind of like too big too quickly and not understand what's going on the shop floor. What do you think to that? They haven't assessed how they've got there. So therefore they can't replicate it. And if they can't replicate it, it's not scalable. They just got there by accident. How many businesses? Or the market was good or whatever kind of thing. I'm sure you're providing services to so many businesses that felt that they'd nailed it post-COVID times. And then along came 2023 and it swiped us all out. To interject, that made me laugh a little bit, where it was about 18 months ago, or before the whole COVID thing, where they were paying grads in London like 45 grand. And it's like, and then they was just stuck with them and just doing, also there were so many jobs about, they just forgot the whole BD thing, and now they've got to unwire that culture. And it's kind of like,
You got to build the business on the right principles, right?
Absolutely. And those principles need to be simple, effective. They need to be tangible. So I'm a big fan of a CRM, as you know. You know, the amount of memes I put out there.
I love that. You're doing well on that. That kind of stuff flying, isn't it, at the moment?
Well, I enjoy it because I spend my life campaigning process and tangible process.
Oh, this is I love all this. I want to delve into this.
Well, Chris, we're recruiters. We're simple people.
Yeah.
That need to follow a simple set of instructions. And we need to do that over and over again with a smile on our face, knowing a bit about our market, and we will produce a result. It doesn't need to be any more complex than that. But we need that system to enable that. And a business needs that system to be able to look at it and go, that worked, proof of concept. We know that has worked. Therefore, we can now grow around that. We can enhance that. And that's key.
I think it amazes me, right? You know, people will spend quite a lot of money on a database. It almost doesn't matter to an extent what it does, but the database could be the best database in the world, but the data on that database is the most important thing, what you bloody do with that data, right?
Yeah. And it astounds me how often a board will come to a decision to spend often a six-figure sum to consciously make that decision that they want to upgrade their database from something that probably looks like a payslip, right? To getting that to something with all the bells and whistles. They get that over the line. They see a little uptick in productivity, and then they leave it at the door, and that's a problem. That's a big investment to not have a full 3-year strategy around.
But the database has got to be kind of like, you've got to map it out to your markets. I like to go vertical into horizontal, so technology into different industry sectors, but then you're coding up your candidates, you're coding up your clients, and you want to get in a position where a consultant gets a good candidate in, and that person can know 10, 15, 20, 30 clients to send it to immediately. Conversely, a role comes in, I know 15 people I can send it to, and I think that doesn't happen enough. I think people say they're specialists, but they're not.
It's my least favourite word in the industry. So we want to talk about what gives me the ick. It's somebody overusing the word specialist, because invariably they're not.
Yes.
I take it upon myself as a people and performance professional to produce experts. I just
love that.
Want that to be what I'm about as an individual. I work really hard to be an expert in my field, and I do that with a lot of hard work, research, listening, YouTubing, podcasting, reading.
Yes.
Because Chris, I don't have a degree in performance psychology.
I know.
You know, I've got to work hard to put myself in that position where I can talk credibly, passionately,
100%.
In order to get people to feel like they can take over the world. Recruiters can do exactly the same thing. And it really doesn't take a lot of research sprinkles on top of the CRM, on top of being given the right market, on top of having a great manager to take you from a average specialist, right? To being a recruitment expert is my thing one.
Oh, absolutely. I put a post out fairly recently about the greatest billers are often resources first. So there's so much knowledge you can get from candidates, right? But also, I think consultants would tend to treat a candidate slightly different. I always train my consultants, when you're speaking to a candidate, you almost pitch the same way as you would do a client. You're name dropping specific competitors where that candidate might want to work, projects. You're actually going in as and my objective, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate, is to try and get you in front of as many of these customers as possible. Would you like that? And kind of like, rather than saying I'm a specialist IT recruiter, but that's just not deep enough. But once you've got that knowledge, you've got the confidence. When a consultant's got confidence, you've got more chance of actually getting the sale. The knowledge is the real power here, as you say. And I think I'd sooner slow down to speed up and get someone to be doing presentation on their market before they understand the process of recruitment.
Well, it's a key onboarding feature that I use in the models that I produce is the presentation and research element. I think where a lot of businesses or managers could take some advice here is okay, when you have a new starter at more of a junior end, or perhaps somebody that's senior that is divulging into a new market, don't make the assumptions that they know how to conduct a decent research campaign. You have to produce some parameters for that. So, you know, something that I've used for years, and actually it was one of my old CEOs that taught me this. I'm not going to try and take this as my own, but
of course.
For our juniors, we do something called a news article challenge. So in their first week, they have to go within their market. They will have been issued a market. And within that, they have to go and find various online sources that isn't LinkedIn, because we know that that's there and that's a given, that they can build into their research time every single week and forevermore. And then from that, they have to pick out a particular article that is giving them some information about their market. So say, for example, I'm working with a young lady at the moment that is building out the software industry in Germany across pharmaceuticals. So her responsibility was to go and find me some techie related news within pharma, within the DACH region.
Brilliant.
And then I want her to articulate that to me, because what do we do every day? We absorb information that people give us, and then we have to articulate that. That's what our basic salary pays us to do, is to communicate the key features of what a job wants us to do. That's the basics, right? But I want to see that realized in the people that I work with and develop. And actually what that encourages leaders to then do is go, okay, I'm not just asking someone to go and do some research in software engineering in pharmaceuticals in the DACH region. That's massive. Give them some pillars. And then again, where I think leaders fall down is they don't follow that up.
No.
They don't go, okay, we're going to have a review on that in a week's time. You're going to present that to me. We're going to have a lovely discussion about it. And then we're going to agree the next pillar for research from that point.
Yeah, and that's also a form of business development as well, because moving on to the business development piece, you can use that information in the form of a blog or an article or something to attract the attention of a customer, and then you can sell and use, you know, there's so many benefits.
There's so much stuff online. So funny story, my first ever market, Chris, was engineering, but not software. We're talking CAD designers. CATIA V5, Pro E and AutoCAD.
Wow.
I was given 7 postcodes. So my first office was based in Reading with Huxley Associates. Big shout out to Owen Humphreys, my first manager. What a legend. And 7 postcodes, which basically scaled down the M4 to your neck of the woods, right? It was basically Reading to Bristol and then bounce on to kind of Exeter.
So not a massive pot.
Not a massive pot, but that was the model back then, and that was enough. That genuinely was enough for us all to earn what we needed to earn. This is
what makes me laugh. Like some of the businesses I work with, I'm covering Europe and a bit of US. I'm like, really? Like,
madness.
How the hell are you going to do that?
Total madness.
When I started out, I was doing AS400 mainframe in the Southwest, which is a really old legacy system. There was only 43 clients in the Southwest. I placed in 42 of them. I was billing 600 grand a year. I'm not saying that, you know, I just think sometimes that the whole inch wide, mile deep, less is more thing, I just think no one person can take on an entire country, and it just makes me laugh.
How they try and build that is laughable, but that's a whole nother subject. So anyway, going back to how we had to conduct research then, well, we had to subscribe to paperback magazines, particularly within engineering, right? So I remember, I don't know if you remember back in the S3 days, Chris, you used to have your car targets, didn't you?
Absolutely. I won the first one, the Citroen Saxo, and then in the end I got a BMW M3 convertible.
Citroen Saxo, you're showing your age there. We'd advanced to the Polos at that
there
point.
We go.
It was the Polos, the Golfs and the Porsches. Unfortunately, I never got to the Porsche level. So I remember having my first 1.4 Polo. Nice. And I remember going and picking up one of my friends, and she'd gotten to get into the passenger side of the car. And I had Electromech and Electronics weekly paperback copies on my passenger seat with a couple of highlighters. And being laughed at. You know, my friend, bless her, what on earth is this, Miffy? Like, what are you reading? Where's the Cosmopolitan and the Vogue? I was like, that's my moneymaker. Leave it alone.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm. But we used to go through it with a highlighter.
Yeah, I remember.
I have to hold myself back now, you know, sustainably minded. And
of course.
say to my juniors, I'll print that off and get a highlighter, because
that's what it was like back then.
I'm quite physical, and you know, I like to touch and move about. So I think that's just my traits, but that's what we used to have to do back then. Nowadays, there's podcasts, there's YouTube. You can go onto TikTok nowadays and learn the basics of not to be a developer, but to gain the understanding of how a front end developer works versus a back end versus mobile dev.
Totally.
There is an abundance of online content that our recruiters do not maximize to become an expert. They're too content on being specialists.
Absolutely. I want to go touch back on the leadership thing, because you mentioned the word follow-up, and I love follow-up. Some of my clients call me the king of the follow-up, because I think it's so important. I think that communication at the top level is so important, how the leadership team communicates. If they're constantly just sending emails out, which I have been guilty of in the past in my previous business, I learned from, I think then that emanates, and then the consultants will only send emails to their clients. Whereas if you're having a meeting, if you need to convey a message, try to do it face to face with your people, or try and do it in a clear way. How you communicate internally will reflect how your business communicates externally.
Yeah, and I think if you're hiding behind written communication, absolutely you're not setting the right tone. I do think there is a generational thing there as well, though, and
it's difficult because technology, you know, automation, but
we have to be appreciative of that. You can't change the times, Chris.
No.
That just is what it is, and because you and I are generationally, basically a nice way of saying we're really old.
We are getting on a bit.
We're getting on a little bit. We have to move with the times, but I think what we really have to understand in the world of networking is that we are also in the world of automation, and automation has just created this abundance of B2B, B2C sales culture. I don't know about you, Chris, but every time I log into my Gmail, I've been sold a holiday, a new pair of shoes, a consulting service, and therapy, all in the space of
you all needed it at one point, I'm sure.
So you can't stand out. You cannot hope to stand out with written communication as your main way of transacting. Going back to the word that you used around follow-up, internally and externally, okay, there is a time and a place for that written, credible follow-up.
Of course.
But have you worked hard to have that vocal or visual sales touch point with that target organization or that target client? And again, even if you're managing teams internally, are you showing up and conducting yourself accordingly on behalf of your team? I think you're right. It all goes together. Yeah.
So I think people have got an understanding of what you do. And we haven't got long enough for you to explain everything, but a couple of questions in one. What does a typical week look like, and how do you tend to measure performance?
It's measuring performance is something I get asked a lot, so I'm pleased you've asked that. So my responsibility right now is I work as, well, right now, this is what I do, and this is what I love doing. I'm a people and performance director. I work for a company called Trilogy International. They're an SME contract provider of technology, change and transformation staff, Europe, UK, US.
Love that.
Right? Lots of businesses out there that follow that model. These guys are exceptional at what they do in the contract market. So when we talk about our niche, they've stayed in their lane. They do about 10% perm revenue, and that's over in the States.
That's fairly unusual these days, but I love that. I'm a contract recruiter through and through. But.
And so was I, and that's why it's a match made in heaven. I'm relatively new to my journey with these guys, and already it's been fantastic.
Just on that point, before you elaborate, the whole contract versus perm thing, I mean, I've got loads of perm experiences when I love perm, but I feel very grateful that I was brought up on contract, because I just feel controversially that in many aspects it's a it's a different art, but in some ways I think it's a bit more salesy, in also a bit more intricate, but people wouldn't think that because it's quite quick.
It's just a different funnel. I would completely agree. So I was brought up on contract and to be a contract recruiter, and I actually tried to do perm for a bit, and you know, I was average at perm and I was good at contract recruitment. So arguably I failed at perm, but then when I made that leap into development, I spent a lot of time working with exceptional performers in the permanent market and in quite rugged markets as well, to understand how they operated. And it's candidate driven versus client driven. We all know that. That's not a revolutionary statement there, but it's then, as we've already said, the process, how something is built on the system, the follow up. And actually there is this perception in the permanent market that you don't need to, or there isn't as much of an importance around a passive candidate network. Actually, if you want to be the person placing high worth candidates, you absolutely have to have a passive candidate network on a permanent
desk. And when
desk.
you do, you know the market better as well.
100%, it all goes. You're an expert in that situation, and that's so key. And then, as we know with contract, you know, it's about pace and it's about urgency. So I think you need exceptional contractors with a great client network in equal measure. But again, you need your system to facilitate that pace that you're able to deliver, with quality at the heart of that as well. Can you deliver good candidates quickly? And can you market a good candidate quickly because you have robust networks?
100%. Also, I think the contract aspect of it almost forces you down the road. You have to close the client, have to get the client control, where perm is a bit like, you know, even when the offer comes in on perm, when's you start, or 5 or 6 weeks, you know, but on contract you kind of like, you got to close everything at the start, which I love.
And that's why it feels like home being with Trilogy, because of the contract element of what they do and just sticking to it. You know, they're very good at staying in their lane, and that's why they had despite the odds in 2023, and it's not showy offy, because it was bloody hard last year.
It was.
They had an okay year. They managed to keep their head above that profit line.
We'll go back to the performance question in a minute, because I jumped a bit on that. Last year being difficult, do you think we're starting to come out of it, or what do you think this year's going to be like?
I think this year will be much of the same, but I don't think it's going to feel like a shock this year.
Right. So
last year was hair on fire, complete flip of the market. We knew that was coming, Chris, didn't we? We knew that was coming, but I think we ignored the signs because we were just enjoying riding that wave. We should have mitigated. We should have put some measures in quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Last year saw a lot of consultants fall short because psychologically it hurt them, losing some of their relationships, and that is hard. We've all been there where we've lost a lot of runners in a day, or you know, a customer's pulled the rug underneath you with some terms, or you've lost that relationship. Imagine that with multiple clients, with relationships that they'd worked hard to build and deliver on. So the psychological element of last year was bruising, and some people were able to rebuild themselves, some people weren't. And then the skill set had to change. So we had to go from being exceptional deliverers of talent and process facilitators,
being hunters again,
to being hunters. We had to sharpen up our spears and get back out there. And that, again, is hard. Psychologically, that was a battle.
But my view, and I've always said this, and it's easy for me to say, but I, no matter how busy I've been, I've always embedded a culture of, if I've got one job on or 1,000 jobs on, you'll be Dean at some point this week, mate.
I agree, but when all a consultant had to do last year
I know.
Not last year, the 2 years prior, post-COVID times, was spec out an average developer.
I know.
What are you going to do? Tell him to not buy a winning lottery ticket? Yeah,
but I think it's about, you know, having a short, medium, or long. People with that more experience can, when it's good, it never lasts.
And we are all old enough and grey enough to know that was the case, and that was my point. I don't think businesses acted soon enough. I remember mid 2022. producing some trend data around sales calls, BD calls, and client meetings with logos that we didn't have signed terms with. So this is this value of data and what I bring to the table. And at the time it was, everything is a bit low there. God, we're not really doing a lot there, are we? But it was so hard to make that stick because I did 3 deals last month and I'm 70% over target. And trying to say, well, in 6 months' time, you won't be. One, I didn't have a crystal ball, so it's hard. It was hard to make that land. And I think a lot of professionals within learning and development, operations, performance, and general directors that take a bit of passion and pride in data will have all had that battle.
Absolutely.
And it's not an I told you so moment.
No, it's not. It comes with experience. So when I'm holding board meetings and we have these league tables, I don't necessarily look at the deals done because the person at the top is great. I'll ask you the question, but I look at certain data, not just the amount of deals. I'll look at other data to know whether or not in the next 2 or 3 months that person's still going to be at the top. Because more often than not, it's the person that's in the middle that I think I'm going to bet on that horse because he or she's done this, and this. So what data or performance stuff do you look at?
So how I show value in my role is, and my brain's a triangle. So we have to work in a funnel always, right? I think the key difference between somebody in like an operational performance role is to provide value on the process, the inputs, the controllable inputs. And then it's down to the associate directors and directors to manage the triangle at the end, which is the sales output, right? And that's how we live in a lovely relationship together. I manage that and they manage the end goal. And that's how you can show progress as a development professional, is by enhancing, developing, coaching at the bottom phase of that triangle. So it's the controllable input. So an example of that would be at the sales end, we need more converted leads. Well, that's a journey. Let's take it all the way back. You know, that's a business development process. It's a routes to market, whatever you want to call it. So my job is to take it all the way back and understand at the root cause why we're not hitting or doing many converted leads. Well, it will be candidate networks. It will be the amount of passive candidate networking you're doing. It will be your callback strategy, your candidate meeting strategy. So I can very quickly get hold of that data 100%. And go, well, it's no surprise you don't have any converted leads because last week your team only added 2 new candidates. They only did 3 callbacks.
There we go.
And 12 qualification calls.
Totally.
You know, it's a simple method.
It's understanding what constitutes a good day, a good week, and a good month. And it's not just the number of deals. Another example is if you was to ask a consultant how many deals you want to do a month, 4. You're going to do 4 deals a month. So if you look at the data over the last 2 years, you need X number of CVs to get 1 deal, X number of interviews, X number. So in order to get 4 deals, you need to do, if you were doing 25 of them, 30 of them, 40 of them, you'd guarantee that. So that's why we're asking you to do it and asking you not making it up. And it's just trying to, once you explain it like we're doing, I think that's when you start to embed it and people actually, I do want to have 5 actual business conversations or touch points today, because if I don't, I'm not going to hit my 4 deals. Yeah.
And you have to be patient with that though. You can't just run a workshop, do a couple of coaching sessions, show people some data, give them a fancy dashboard and expect people to just take the bait. It's a process and you have to almost treat it like a change management cycle. You're completely, if they're not delivering something at all, and then you're expecting them to go from 0 to 100 within a matter of weeks because you just did a workshop on it, I think you won't get the results.
How I do it, you probably similar. I do like a 90-day thing where we agree these metrics over 90 days, but we do follow it up every week or 2 weeks as well. And it's, as you say, it takes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks for it to sit. And once it's there, you still got to follow it up. But it's just, as you say, I think people expect these things because we're not just implementing processes or a form of metrics. We're kind of changing a mindset and a culture and a belief system about it.
100%. You've got to change the physical performance and the mental output. So that takes a minute. And actually in that transaction, between developer and consultant as an example, there is just as much of a coaching process with the manager of that consultant well, because if they knew how to manage that funnel, that would have been done. That would be a team that was producing the converted lead as the example that we're using. So if they're not, don't be afraid as a development professional to go, right, come on, you're on this journey with me as well, because you've got to understand how to replicate that with multiple consultants so you can trend upwards on that.
Because one of the reasons I rate you really highly is I'm going to ask you a question about that as well. I was going to ask you what makes a good kind of recruitment trainer. You're not just a recruitment trainer, you're way more than that. But I think it's, on one hand, we're talking about all this nice data and understanding it, and I think that's important, but I think it's how you or we or whoever is doing it implements that, and having a relationship with that consultant. I think you have to be a human being, but you have to be kind of like, because there's being a recruitment consultant can be really challenging, right? So how do you embed it then? Do you have are you more of a, because I've worked with many kind of operation directors and COOs, and some have been fierce as fuck, and the reason why they haven't done it is because they shout and they tell. I think sometimes you need to do that as well. What's your style to embed this? Because this is not an easy thing to just do.
I celebrate the easy wins. Right. I celebrate the failings. And I properly map out with anybody that I'm working with a realistic expectation of what those pillars of success, those stepping stones of success will look like.
Love that.
I don't focus on the end goal. I focus on the process, because if they love the process, they'll do it multiple.
And they'll get the end goal as well.
You can slog someone, like you said, with a shouty CEO to get something over the line, but will they do it again in quick succession? Absolutely not. Are you raising a future superstar that will then know how to teach that to others if you're looking to scale your business?
No.
Absolutely not. So, for example, with trainees, I don't even talk about pulling a job for months. If that happens, that's a byproduct of us building a credible network of contract candidates and a well-mapped and researched hot list network of clients within logos that they believe have hired in their specialist markets before, right?
Love that.
So we focus on the realistic inputs and then what those realistic outputs are, and we do that in phases. As I said, I'm always in that triangle form, Chris, which is we've got to feel like we nail that base level before we even start talking about the next set of instructions.
That makes sense.
And I pride myself on being able to do that with all problems. You just funnel it back, take that step back.
I think as well, I think recruitment consultants tend to get delusions of grandeur, and they take on too many briefs that they sound great, but they haven't got I'd sooner have a very well qualified process versus a really qualified JD, because you obviously want both. I spent an hour on the phone, 2 hours on the phone, I know exactly what they want, but you're getting 6 other agencies, you're not dealing with the hiring manager. It's like, get that control first, but also, I walk into a lot of businesses, and if I was to ask a consultant, so you've got a job on, what do you do first? I go into the database. What do you do? The first thing I do is write an advert. What do you do? The first thing I do is, and they all do different things as well. So there's gaps everywhere.
But there is not one thing that will solve and enable you to build a profitable desk. You have to be able to nail it all. And then, of course, you'll pick your preferences out in terms of what you're good at. But you have to be able to show that fully. So with more junior consultants, I need them to prove each concept and get a win out of each concept. And then as they progress, they might choose referencing over speccing as an example, because they just like that. But
sometimes the only way you can find this out is, what I used to do is, and I still do it now to an extent, is get my chair and sit next to the consultant in a very, because I've already built a relationship with them. And so I'm just going to sit here for 2 hours and observe. And if you observe, you do a billion search like that, or you put your CVs over there, it's kind of like, even in a one-to-one, or even on, consultants, whether they do it intentionally or not, they can pull the wool up. You've got to get under that bonnet, right?
Oh, for sure. And that's lazy management all over. They love sitting in a weekly setup or a Friday wash up. Right, let's talk about the jobs, how many CVs you've sent, spec CVs. The biggest thing that I find when I coach and look at spec CVs is I'll look and it will be the same copy and pasted email, and they'll have attached the same CV for weeks on end because the manager hasn't checked. The problem there is the consultant hasn't understood the why, the value. What are you looking to deliver in that moment by sending that to somebody that you think could buy that person? They're just trying to hit a number. So then you've got to work harder as a business, a team, an L&D department, or as a director to get your consultants to truly understand the value of doing it right.
And get them to step out, because they're so in it. I'd get them to step. What I do is say, so mate, if you was a hiring manager and you received that email, would you, it was like, oh no, of course I wouldn't do anything, because all it says is project manager. It doesn't, it's kind of like, sometimes you've just got to take them out of it.
And that's a learning process for the more junior end, but my God, the amount of principles and people that bill okay, 250, 300k a year billers, right? When I dive into their data, it always comes back to the basics that are not being nailed that could get them, because I always say, Chris, the maths adds up quick, right? If by adopting a better process by one key input, spec CVs, and you enhance that, and that gives you an extra deal a quarter, that's 4 extra deals a year.
Huge difference.
And if your average deal value is 10k, right? Just say on the permanent side, that's an extra 40 grand a year just off of doing one thing a little bit better. That's
marginal
so key.
Gains. But if you did marginal gains on things like making sure every time you do speak to a candidate, you're asking where else they're interviewing, or there's so many little things that add up to the big things. This has gone so quick. We're kind of almost running towards the end. Your knowledge is, if I ever wanted to set up a recruitment business again, you'd probably be one of my first hires. I can definitely work with you, because I think people underplay the importance of having someone in this role like you. And I think, bravo to you.
Thanks, Chris.
90, 180, 270, 360. This gets my back up. What's your view on the kind of the 180? I know we need it as well. But I'm a traditional 360 recruiter. What's your whole view of that?
I'm conflicted, because I do think everybody is allowed to have an individual strength. And once you've really latched onto that, you absolutely should play to somebody's strengths, right? However, I think where a lot of this has come around is people have built promotional structures in business based on a person to cater for that person rather than the greater good of the business. And again, I'm always in two minds when I say that out loud, because we should care about the individuals, but sometimes we could work a little bit harder to make an individual work within a position that a company needs.
A little bit of a cop-out. Like, so when the deal goes in, it's great, but when it doesn't go in, you've got 17 people on the roll, and there's no there's no accountability. But I feel like it's almost because I'm 180 and I only speak to candidates, I can't do BD. Well, no, actually you can do BD, because you can ask more questions from the candidate, you can get leads, you can get knowledge, you can get information. So I think that point is where if you are 180 on the client side, in a, obviously I'm very conventional tech recruitment in terms of my experience. I really struggle with how do you find the right context, information, project MI without the candidate. It's a chicken and egg situation for me. Right. So I really struggle with that as a concept. I, on the other side, the 180 candidate side, we know that there is an absolute value in there if you are an incredible talent acquisition consultant. That's what it is, right? It just gets called either side of the 180 when you work in agency. But if you work for a large financial services business in the talent acquisition team or whatever, your skill set is still you still need to be able to build a network of professionals that match the need of that business, and that is a skill. And I do think there is a place for that. But what businesses do wrong, Chris, is they don't provide
a learning framework and they don't put that on a pedestal like they should. If you are a candidate 180 within an agency and you are able to produce time after time market leading skills that is speccable, that always gets to final and always gets to offers, that's fantastic. But they often get downplayed as second-rate citizens within the agency world, and that's where we go wrong, I think. So I'm more pro it on the candidate side. I struggle to connect with it if it's 180 just on the client side.
I think that's a brilliant answer, but I think if you are going to do it, and sometimes you have to do it because of the way that the business is, it's the communication, because the information that's passed from the candidate to the consultant is one thing. The consultant's got to pass it to the other person. It's like you've got to get that on point, haven't you? Otherwise, things get lost in the ether.
Really key. And design your structure based on the growth plans of the business, not the individuals.
Totally. Kind of on that point, why do you think recruitment businesses are notoriously not very good at hiring for themselves? And what do you think it takes to have a good hiring strategy and process?
Bias on all forms. We love the word culture fit. That just means, do they like the same music, trainers, football team, and weekend endeavours as me? And that's
so true.
That's the reality. When you have a industry which is and has personality in abundance, you are looking and trying to hire people that replicate that personality, because it's you thinking, well, if I hire somebody that was just like John, then John's successful, this person will be successful as well. So there's a real lack of knowledge around different types of biases and how that goes together. I think that then means that there's no real formal training. There's no real competency-based interviews. There's no real understanding of actually how to uncover, is someone resilient? Is somebody self-disciplined? I mean, the amount of interview training sessions that I've run with just basic questions that directors don't necessarily know is quite poor. So there is no real training around that, and that therefore equals a poor result, in my opinion. And there is just an incredible amount of bias.
I think that the whole hiring strategy needs to sort of start from the very top around having a very clear, crystal vision, mission and values that you and the whole business can pretty much articulate. If it's all in the lift, we can all say the same thing. And then everyone within that business is kind of bought in the values that most agencies have on the website written on the wall. They don't even know they are actual real values. But then, you're basing your hiring decisions on those values as well. And when you're interviewing the candidates, you're building a picture of what the business is and where they can fit into that, as opposed to, do you understand what I'm trying to say? You look at it a bit more holistically rather than, we actually need a couple of contract consultants to go and get them kind of mentality,
that it's lazy and it's so typical. We're all guilty of that. God, I've been guilty of that. I look back at some of the feedback sentences that I've written back to Rec to Recs or our internal teams, and I've looked at that and thought, that's not right, because I haven't tested that properly and gone on a journey myself to be a better interviewer, to uncover the right people. It's so hard. It's the one thing that all recruitment businesses would love to have the answer to. And there's many theories, psychometrics, phone tests, case studies. We're always searching for that one thing that makes that a little bit easier. But I just think being trained to interview properly, understanding what competencies fit a job spec the same as any other professional business does.
100%.
Gets rid of those pain points a bit more.
And also it's about not stopping. I know it sounds a bit obvious, but I think the whole hiring strategy must include. So we've landed them. What is that onboarding process like? What's the retention? What's the development? Kind of like, you almost have to map out that first 12 months quite detailed, don't you?
Yeah, you really do. Pre-onboarding, particularly at a junior level. one of the things that I think we've lost in the post-COVID times, and it might have been a bit like this pre-COVID, you know, we've all gotten a little bit soft and we've stopped using things like that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
You as an individual are being invested in. So, right, how are you going to return on that investment? It's okay to say that. We know what we're signing up for as recruitment consultants. So I put a lot of emphasis on that. Right, here is the information. I am going to hold your hand through this, but it's that I'm taking you to water. I expect you to drink. You know, I need to see that you want this for yourself as much as I want this for you. And with proper onboarding and proper processes, you can see that pretty quickly. So you can fail fast with a hire and kind of get them off your payroll if it's just not going to work out. And sometimes we make mistakes, and that's okay. Or if you can see the right will and perhaps not as much skill as you thought they had, but you can work with that all day long, and you can up that in your onboarding strategy to make them good.
In your experience and your belief, do you think the reasons why people don't work out businesses, is it the hiring process? Is it the bad leadership? Or is it I know it's quite a sweeping statement, or is it the person in the role more so? Or is it it's probably a combination of all of those? But
I mean, I'd be charging a premium day rate if I had the answer to that locked up with a bow on. But it absolutely is a combination of all of the above. And I think that's what I work hard to do in my position. As you said, it's not just training. It's how are we going to market? How are we hiring? How are we pre-onboarding? How are we onboarding? How does that match to the visual representation in the business, to the job specs, to the promotion structure, to the incentives? You know, you don't just need to copy what you can see on LinkedIn.
No.
Come up with something that makes sense to the business and what you're trying to drive. So it is everything. And I should be grateful of that, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't have a job.
No. Honestly, you are one of the most knowledgeable and inspirational recruiters I've met, and I've met quite a few.
Thank you.
In my time. It's all kind of come to the end. That went really quickly. Before we do go, what kind of advice would you give recruitment business owners at the moment, and also recruitment consultants at the moment?
Recruitment consultants have a BD first mindset. That is the way that the funnel is working now. It is client driven. And it will be for a while. So sit in it, get comfortable with it, sharpen up, and get on the phone, because you are not going to stand out over email. We hire your personality. Get it out there and build your brand. And for business owners, put an importance in a branding strategy with your consultants. They are the biggest drivers of your logo, your reputation, and your service. That can't be understated enough. How are you developing consultants to build confidence on phone-based selling, but not just for the sake of it? Like, please don't hire a load of people that sound like radio DJ hosts and give clients the ick. You know, teach them to do it properly, and you know, invest in process, systems and structure, so what you build is replicable, scalable and profitable.
On that note, absolutely amazing chat with you. Thanks for coming on the show. Where can people find you before you go?
So all things recruitment on Instagram, LinkedIn, growing slowly but surely. And I'm the People and Performance Director at Trilogy. Thanks,
You're a
Chris.
star. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks a lot.